We are about to dive into one of the most bizarre and frankly disturbing cases in all of medical history. This is the story of an 18th century Frenchman named Tarrare, a man with an appetite so unbelievable it seemed to break the laws of biology and led him down an incredibly dark and tragic path. I mean, think about that question for a second. Could someone really eat all that and still be hungry? It sounds like something out of a horror movie. But for this man, Tarrare, this wasn't some hypothetical. This was his everyday reality. His hunger was this relentless, overpowering force that literally controlled every single moment of his life. So there is a medical term for this. It's called polyphagia. But calling what Tarrare had overeating is a massive understatement. His condition was so extreme, so far beyond anything they'd ever seen, that it completely baffled the top doctors of his day. It turned him into this object of both intense fascination and absolute terror. So who exactly was this man? Let's take a closer look at Tarrare himself, because he was a true biological paradox. He was born into a really poor farming family near Lyon, France. We don't even know his real name. Tarrare was just a nickname, and the story goes it might have come from a popular French phrase, "Baume baume Tarrare," which was meant to sound like a loud explosion. A pretty fitting name, as you're about to find out. By the time he was a teenager, his appetite was already the stuff of legend. It was reported that he could eat an entire quarter of a bullock, that's a young bull, in just one day. To put that in perspective, that's an amount of meat that would have been roughly equal to his own body weight. And this is where the story gets really strange. Despite eating these mountains of food, Tarrare weighed only about 100 pounds. He was thin, average height, and he never, ever seemed to gain any weight. It was like his body was a furnace, just burning through calories at a rate that seemed physically impossible. His body actually started to physically change, to adapt to his condition in these really bizarre ways. His mouth stretched to become unusually wide. His skin was so loose and elastic that when his stomach was empty, he could literally take the folds of skin from his belly and wrap them all the way around his waist. He was also constantly hot, just radiating heat and sweating so much that people said you could see a vapor, like steam, rising off of him. And all of this led to one of the most tragic parts of his condition. This quote is from Dr. Percy, the surgeon who studied him for years, and it really says it all. The smell that came off of Tarrare was so overpowering, so foul, that people couldn't even stand to be near him. It was the stench of his body in overdrive, of food constantly rotting inside him. So, as you can imagine, he was completely ostracized. He couldn't live a normal life. Tarrare was forced to turn the very thing that made him an outcast into a public spectacle. His parents, who were poor farmers, just couldn't afford to feed him. They had no choice but to throw him out. He ended up falling in with a traveling troupe of thieves and prostitutes, and he eventually became a street performer. His horrifying, unbelievable ability to eat anything became the only way he could make a living. And his act, it went way beyond just swallowing a bunch of apples or stones. No, the real draw, the thing that pulled in the crowds, was much more gruesome. He would eat live animals. His specialty was to take a live cat, tear it open with his teeth, drink its blood, and then consume the entire animal, leaving nothing behind but the bones. Now, you'd think the story couldn't possibly get any stranger. Well, it does. This bizarre talent for swallowing things whole eventually caught the eye of the French military, and that led to one of the weirdest attempts at espionage in history. He joined the army but was almost immediately hospitalized for exhaustion. I mean, military rations were nothing to him. But the doctors who treated him, Corvel and Percy, they saw something else. They saw an opportunity. As a test, they had him swallow a small wooden box. And when he passed it 30 hours later, with the contents perfectly safe inside, they got an idea. The plan they came up with was, on paper, pretty simple. Tarrare would basically become a human courier. He'd swallow secret messages, sneak across enemy lines, and then deliver them. It was a brilliant, if, disgusting, use of his unique biology. But there was a big problem. The commanding general, a guy named Alexandre de Beauharnais, was really not impressed with Tarrare's intellect. He saw him as simple-minded, someone not fit for a real mission. So for his first time out, they just gave him a test message, something that basically just asked a French colonel to confirm he got it. It was a complete disaster from the start. Tarrare didn't speak a word of German, and with his strange behavior and that horrible smell, he stuck out like a sore thumb. He was captured by the Prussians almost immediately. They beat him, and when he finally passed the box, they discovered the message was meaningless. They were so furious, they staged a mock execution, which completely traumatized him, and then they just sent him back to the French line. So after that horrifying experience, Tarrare went back to Dr. Percy and just begged for a cure. He was done. But this next chapter, back in the hospital, would somehow become the darkest part of his entire life. Dr. Percy really did try everything that 18th century medicine had to offer. He gave him opium tinctures, wine vinegar, even tobacco pills to try and make him nauseous. Nothing worked. The hunger would always come roaring back, even stronger than before. With no cure in sight, Tarrare's desperation just spiraled. His hunger drove him to do the most horrifying things imaginable. He started sneaking out of his room to drink the blood from patients who were undergoing bloodletting. And he was caught, more than once, in the hospital morgue, trying to eat the bodies. And then, the absolute worst happened. A 14-month-old baby disappeared from the hospital. Immediately, everyone suspected Tarrare. Now, they never proved it, but just the accusation was enough. The hospital staff, who were already terrified of him, drove him out for good. 4 years later, Tarrare died of tuberculosis. He was only 26 years old. But his death finally gave scientists the one thing they'd always wanted, a chance to look inside his body and try to figure out what on earth was wrong with him. The autopsy revealed a body just grotesquely transformed. His esophagus was so stretched out that the surgeons said they could look straight down it and see into his stomach. And that stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers, and it took up almost his entire abdominal cavity. His liver and gallbladder were also huge and diseased. He hadn't just been ruled by his hunger. His body had physically become one giant, malfunctioning digestive system. What's wild is that Tarrare wasn't totally one of a kind. There was another man, Charles Anomaly, who had a similar crazy appetite. But when you compare them, it just highlights how extreme Tarrare's case really was. Anomaly had a normal build, and he didn't have the horrible smell or the loose skin. It suggests that whatever Tarrare had was far more severe, maybe an extreme form of hyperthyroidism, or even damage to the part of the brain that controls appetite. It was a disorder that had completely transformed his entire body. So, in the end, what do we make of him? Was he a medical marvel? A tragic victim just completely enslaved by a body he had no control over? Or was he a monster, driven to do unspeakable things by a hunger he couldn't satisfy? His story is still one of medicine's most profound and disturbing mysteries, and it really makes you wonder about the absolute limits of human biology.